So the topic I wanted to talk about tonight is some of the challenges of the old spiritual paradigms. By those old paradigms, I mean kind of the classic traditional approaches from Buddhism, from Vedanta, Zen, those kinds of things. And this talk is inspired by some experiences I had this weekend. So at the Abbey, we're having a series of seminars. It's part of the Joseph Campbell Society about the kind of generally the evolution of religious consciousness. So this Saturday, Lynn, the abbot, he was talking about some various topics relating to around a Thich Nhat Hanh book, No Fear, No Death. And so he was talking just generally about these concepts, about the nature of reality, what existence means, what it means to meditate, nature of ego, all the classical stuff. I'm sure all the stuff you've all heard, you're all aware of. And it was really interesting. He actually provided some novel synthesis of different ideas. So it was a good talk. But then during the discussion, there was this one woman in particular who was just kind of arguing with him. And from my perspective, it seemed like she just had a lot of anger that she needed to express. And she was very polite and very controlled about it, and very, she wasn't just like screaming crazily or anything, but it just really seemed like she had a lot of anger. And I couldn't really follow her point exactly. I think she was saying that meditation leads to apathy, which is a common critique of meditation, or in Buddhism in general, where if you're meditating, you're not out engaged in the world and making the world a better place. But I think that's kind of what the point of her argument was. But it really just felt like she was in a trauma response. Like I bet her pulse was elevated, her breathing was rapid and shallow, her voice was very agitated. And so just seemed like she was speaking from a place of trauma, which in these times is really common. And I'm sure, and we're seeing this all over the world, right? All these people exploding, arguing with each other, fighting with each other over seemingly for no reason. And so this kind of reminded me of, or is a great illustration of some of the challenges that these old spiritual paradigms are facing in this new era that we're living in. Because the world has changed. Things are different now. And we're all aware of that, right? Things are not the same than they were 5 years ago. And so there's these old spiritual paradigms. There's a couple challenges they're facing. One is a lot of these older paradigms tend to, or often the way they're presented and the way that they're interpreted and the way that we believe them tends to discount the body and discount emotions. Like particularly Buddhism, the idea of detachment is often thought to mean you just kind of ignore your emotions, and all the ideas about no self, that there is no self, that your mind, you're not your mind, you're not your emotions, you can just kind of separate from them. And there is a place for that teaching, and it is a valuable teaching, but that's not the true essence of it, but that's often how it is interpreted. And in this day and age, with the amount of stress that everyone is under and all the triggers that are out there, and also the growing awareness of trauma and how almost everyone has unresolved trauma and all these emotional wounds that affect how we interact with people in the world and affect how we relate to the world. It no longer works to discount the body like that and discount the mind and try to separate, because that kind of approach of detachment is for people that have unresolved trauma, that sounds and leads to dissociation, right? Just cutting off from the body, not feeling anything. And that's not a healthy way to deal with emotions. So I'm not saying that detachment is dissociation. The ideas behind detachment are valid. It's a beautiful teaching when it's properly presented and properly interpreted. But so that leads me to another challenge of the old spiritual paradigms is that they have, and this is what I talked about last week a little bit, about how the ideas and the concepts from these paradigms, as one downside of the growing popularity of spirituality and the growing mainstream awareness of it, is that these ideas have been absorbed into our collective human ego and assimilated and rendered meaningless in many cases, right? These beautiful teachings, which were there was they served their purpose. They're valid and they're all correct, and they did a lot of good for us. But it's reached a point where they've been so memeified and commodified and commercialized and turned into online trainings and Facebook posts that they no longer trigger a new awareness in us. Like all these old concepts, everyone knows all these concepts, right? And we think we know what they are, and when we're presented with them, when we see them, the ego says, "Oh, I know what that is," and just files it away instead of actually going into the teaching and allowing the teaching to expand our awareness. Our collective, our individual egos and our collective egos just take all these teachings and just files it away as known, right? It no longer promotes the thoughts in us that lead to a greater awareness and a greater understanding of our experience or how we relate to the world.